Hello and welcome to Pardon the Integration. Before ransomware strikes, avoid these 3 common mistakes, a podcast where we discuss trends in the channel today. I'm your host, Kenna Johnson from the Channel Company. My guest today is Drew Schlussel, Senior Director of Product Marketing with Wasabi Technologies. Drew, thank you so much for joining us here today.
My pleasure, Kenna. Thank you for having me.
We'll be talking about how MSPs can avoid 3 common mistakes. The way our program works is we have 3 topics to discuss, and we have 3 minutes to talk about each. You'll see a countdown clock at the bottom of the screen. First topic, using multi-factor authentication. Second topic, managing your own encryption keys. Third topic, using immutable backups. So let's get started with our first segment. Segment 1, mistake number 1, not using multi-factor authentication. What is multi-factor authentication, or MFA?
When you typically log into some service, right, your email, you typically give a username and password. Those are things that you know about. And that's great, but those are also things that people can take and misuse. Multi-factor authentication introduces an additional layer of verification that you are who you say you are. And typically you're using an application or maybe a physical device that has a one-time password, and you have to provide those credentials in order to make sure that you are who you say you are. There's many ways to do this. The simplest one is just to put an app on your phone, configure it with your service, and now you have a much higher level of security for logging in.
And why is it important to have MFA enabled?
Because there are bad people out there. Because if they do steal your username and password, many folks use the same password for everything. So, of course, once they have that password, they're going to try to use it for any and every service, every access to every secure system. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, right, it means that they are now getting into your bank account, your credit cards, your Netflix account. I mean, you don't want that compromised. So MFA, I would say to anybody, if not just your systems management, but anything having to do with your finances, use MFA.
Does every account need MFA?
In terms of systems administration, right, the biggest mistake is giving multiple people access to the root account, right? Root is the ultimate power user. Root can do everything. And so if those root credentials are compromised, game over. What goes hand in hand with MFA is having role-based access controls, making sure you define who is entitled to manage what parts of your system, and never giving more than a few people, very well-trusted people, full access to every part of your IT system. So, and in most cases, MFA extends to all those different subsystems. Yes, it's more work, but it's more security.
Let's move to segment 2. Mistake number 2, not managing your own encryption keys. Why does encryption matter when storing your data?
Right now, the ransomware attacks that are out there, what they want to do is steal your data and or encrypt your data out from under you, right? Render it unusable to you. For that first part, if they steal your data and it's encrypted, you basically don't have a problem. Okay. Yes, it's embarrassing that you've been cracked or compromised and that they were able to grab some data. But that's probably going to limit the amount of damage done to your organization as long as the data is encrypted. If the data is not encrypted, that's a whole nother story, and a lot of lawyers get involved. It's par for the course. I mean, anybody who is operating today should be not only encrypting their data at rest, but also in transit. Everybody, there are eyes everywhere that are trying to steal your data.
What benefits does managing your own keys provide?
I think for most folks, it's just additional peace of mind. And it may also be part of qualifying for insurance or satisfying some customer requests. Many customers would rather use their own keys than use the default key of their vendor. And that's great. Key management can be a little bit troublesome. It's somewhat complicated, or I should say it's not easy. Being able to provide your own key and know that it is your encryption keys that are protecting your data, that's a much higher level of data security. A lot of folks would prefer to have that.
Does everyone need to manage their own keys?
No, no, they don't. Um, you know, again, it's really a matter of just how far do you want to go and perhaps what governance or compliance regulations you need to meet. In many cases, your backup vendor is encrypting the data. Your cloud storage service provider, like Wasabi, is also encrypting the data. So there are typically multiple layers of defense in play. It's really up to you in terms of a cost benefit analysis. Is it worth it for you to add that additional complexity? In some cases, it's yes. In some cases, it's no.
Segment 3, mistake number 3, not using immutable backups. What is immutability?
Immutability renders your data protected from anyone who is trying to alter it or delete it, right? Two of the things that ransomware attacks are very good at, right? And so you're essentially kind of putting a time lock on this data. It could be minutes, it could be months, it could be years. And by locking that data, you have some additional peace of mind, because not only are there external bad actors trying to manipulate that data, right? There are unfortunately some internal bad actors. More and more, we're seeing cases where IT staff members are being bribed by ransomware gangs to provide access, to provide keys, right, to the data. Immutability protects you not only from external threats, but it protects you from internal threats. It is really the ultimate backstop to protect your data.
How does this strategy help protect you against attacks and recover quickly?
Well, in terms of attacks, typically immutable data or immutable backups are also encrypted. The ransomware folks, they can't delete your backups. They want to delete your backups to extract maximum ransom from you, right? Because if they've compromised your primary systems, they've compromised your, let's say, your primary backup, and it's your secondary backup that's air-gapped, immutable in the cloud, that is your last resort. And that really guarantees that you have viable data with the integrity you need to restore your systems. As far as recovering quickly, again, that's one of those, it kind of depends. If you're in a situation where your systems have to be available with a recovery time objective of seconds or minutes, you're probably operating at a level that is going to have some significant levels of redundancy already in place. For I think most folks who are kind of in that SMB, SME space, being able to recover in a few days is probably going to be sufficient. And if there's insurance involved, unfortunately, the insurance companies are going to want to kind of quarantine your systems and gather evidence so that you can actually make a claim and get some help down the line.
Drew, how can Wasabi help solve these 3 mistakes?
Well, I'm glad you asked. First of all, we, of course, support multi-factor authentication, and we promote it tremendously, very proactively. As soon as you get your account set up, please set up multi-factor authentication. That guarantees you that only the right people are getting access to the data that you are about to put into the system. In terms of encryption keys, we, of course, provide in transit and data at rest encryption, but we also support bring your own key. Very simple. We get requests for this here and there. There's no hesitation. If you want us to use your key, we can support that capability. And then, of course, immutability. We've been talking about this for, I think, years and years now. At least it feels that way. We, of course, support object lock capability, and that's the most granular way of protecting your data. We also have a feature for immutable buckets where everything you put into that bucket space is protected as well. For many folks who are using more sophisticated backup and recovery applications, object lock is what you need, and we support that completely from end to end.
Drew, thank you so much for joining me today. Before we go, I'd like to list my top takeaways. Enabling MFA will help you protect your data. Key management, while complex, can ensure you keep control of your data. Immutable backups are essential to mitigating ransomware attacks. That concludes parting the integration. Before ransomware strikes, avoid these 3 common mistakes. I'm your host, Kenna Johnson. See you next time.